Tonight we present
the Chupacabra in Canavanas. In the early hours of March 7, 1995, local authorities in Canavanas, Puerto Rico, received a series of unsettling reports from several farms in the area. What initially seemed like an act of rural vandalism quickly turned into a regional mystery. More than a dozen animals were found dead under strange circumstances. Goats, chickens, and pigs lay motionless, lifeless, with two identical puncture marks on their necks. What was most disturbing was the total absence of blood in the bodies or on the surrounding ground. Don Eusebio Martinez, a local farmer, was the first to raise the alarm. He reported hearing a metallic, sharp noise coming from his pen during the early hours of the morning. Upon inspecting, he found all his goats dead. It was as if the night had swallowed everything alive there, he said in an interview. This initial discovery marked the beginning of a series of events that would challenge conventional explanations and fuel one of the most enigmatic legends in Latin America, the Chupacabra. Canavanas, a lowland area surrounded by forested hills and bathed by the Grande de Loiza River, had always been a place rich with stories and superstitions. The local population, mostly from rural backgrounds, maintained a close connection with the land, but also with the region's collective imagination. Stories of fantastical beings like the night gargoyles or the guardians of the woods had been passed down through generations, inherited from Taino traditions and reinforced by cultural syncretism after the arrival of the colonizers. In the early 1990s, the area was no stranger to rumors about strange experiments taking place in nearby military installations, including the Roosevelt Roads Naval Base. Some believed these experiments involved genetic manipulation, while others linked them to sporadic UFO sightings in the night sky. This backdrop of suspicion and mystery provided the perfect breeding ground for a legend to take shape. As March progressed, reports of livestock deaths multiplied. In less than 3 weeks, more than 150 animals had been found dead with the same characteristics: puncture marks on their necks, no blood, and no signs of struggle or other external injuries. The rural communities were on the edge of panic. The authorities attempted to offer logical explanations. Hypotheses ranged from wild dog attacks to nocturnal predators. However, these theories were quickly dismissed. Veterinary experts sent to investigate could not determine the cause of death with certainty. It's as if something is draining the life directly from these animals, one of the specialists remarked in a preliminary report. The mayor of Canavanas, Jose Quimo Soto, took an active role in the case. He organized nighttime patrols, accompanying local residents in search of answers. During one of these expeditions, a group claimed to have seen a humanoid figure in the woods near one of the affected farms. According to the witnesses, the creature had grayish skin, intensely glowing eyes, and a strange, almost floating gait. The descriptions were consistent with rumors already circulating among the locals. The local media quickly dubbed the enigmatic predator El Chupacabra, a term that encapsulated the collective fear and soon went viral across Puerto Rico and beyond. The phenomenon attracted the attention of journalists, paranormal investigators, and even international ufologists. Meanwhile, reports of encounters with the creature grew in frequency and detail. A young woman named Ana Torres claimed to have seen it from her kitchen window as it stalked her chickens. According to Ana, the creature was smaller than she expected, but its gaze seemed to pierce straight into the soul. Another account, from a truck driver passing through a rural road, described how a strange being leaped in front of his vehicle with an inhuman jump, disappearing into the dense foliage. On April 25th, a shocking piece of news further rattled the community. An amateur explorer named Luis Rivera, who had been investigating the case with a group of friends, disappeared during a nighttime excursion into the woods. His companions reported hearing a sound they described as an electrical buzzing before Luis, who was a few meters ahead, vanished from their sight. All that was found was his video camera, partially damaged. The footage recovered from Luis Rivera's camera was analyzed by local experts and sent to a television station. The images showed something chilling. a flash of white light followed by a sharp sound and a blurry figure moving quickly toward the lens. The recording abruptly ended with what seemed to be a muffled scream. Luis's disappearance became a turning point in the case. Despite extensive searches in the area, neither he nor any further evidence of his whereabouts was found. The Canavanas forest, once seen as a source of life and livelihood, had turned into a place of fear and speculation. As questions outnumbered answers, an uncomfortable truth began to emerge. What lurked in the darkness of the forest not only defied science but seemed to want to remain hidden. Luis Rivera's disappearance led to a reassessment of the investigations. The footage found on his camera was handed over to international experts, who concluded that the flashes and sharp sound were consistent with unexplained electromagnetic phenomena. However, the blurry figure in the video continued to defy any attempt at identification. The patrols intensified, but with each passing night, the fear grew deeper. The population was divided between those who believed the culprit was a supernatural predator and those who suspected covert human experiments. Amid this tension, a new lead emerged. An anonymous letter delivered to Mayor Soto's office, containing coordinates pointing to a restricted area near the edge of the forest and a cryptic message: "Don't seek what you're not ready to find." The search team, once again led by Mayor Soto and consisting of local police, journalists, and volunteers, decided to follow the lead. The coordinates led them to an old abandoned facility that had once served as a military warehouse during the 1960s and 70s. The entrance was surrounded by overgrowth, and the buildings, rusted and covered in graffiti, appeared harmless. However, upon entering, the team found unsettling signs: corroded metal cages, fragmented documents with military logos, and a persistent chemical smell in the air. Among the recovered documents, a partially legible report caught their attention. Titled Project Codename Chupacabra, it mentioned experiments involving animal species and extreme adaptations designed to survive in hostile environments. The text referenced an unknown biological component called Subject X, described as highly aggressive with a unique metabolic dependency, a requirement for pure hemoglobin. As the team ventured deeper into the facility, they found an underground chamber. There, under the dim light of flashlights, they discovered several cells with bent bars, as if something had forced its way out. In one corner, scratched into the wall with claw-like marks, was a message in English: "Release was a mistake." While exploring the underground chamber, a strange noise interrupted the search. It was a mechanical sound, a buzzing similar to the one recorded on Rivera's camera. Suddenly, the flashlights began to flicker, and a flash of white light illuminated the place. In the midst of the chaos, some witnesses claimed to have seen a humanoid figure swiftly crossing between the shadows, leaving inexplicably deep footprints on the concrete floor. The team decided to evacuate immediately, but in the confusion, one of the volunteers, a young man named Mateo, disappeared. This second disappearance reinforced the belief that they were facing something they could neither comprehend nor control. Mateo was reported missing, and the facility was sealed under orders from local authorities, with a warning that no one should approach. However, in the following days, a detail emerged that changed the entire perspective of the case. One of the journalists who had been part of the expedition revealed a shocking discovery. Photographs recovered from an old laboratory showed a creature with alarmingly similar characteristics to those described by the Chupacabra witnesses. Even more disturbing, the documents indicated that Subject X had escaped control in 1978, and the experiments had been discontinued without the specimen being recovered. The connection was now undeniable. The Chupacabra was not just an urban legend born from collective fear, but the consequence of clandestine scientific experiments. Subject X had adapted to its environment, and in its biological need for hemoglobin, it attacked livestock. This explained both the puncture marks on the bodies and the absence of blood. Yet, the discovery raised more questions than answers. How had the specimen survived for decades without being detected? And why did the attacks intensify in 1995? Some researchers theorized that environmental changes or human intervention in its habitat might have pushed it to act more aggressively. Others suspected that more subjects, like it, still existed, hidden in the vast expanses of forest. The Chupacabra case in Canavanas marked a turning point in the perception of modern mysteries in Latin America. While some insisted it was a warning against irresponsible genetic manipulation, others saw it as a demonstration of how local legends can contain glimpses of even more disturbing truths. Mayor Soto, deeply affected by the events, declared, "Whatever it is we are facing, it reminds us that there are still forces in this world we don't understand. Sometimes those forces are external, but other times they come from within ourselves." Today, the Canavanas forest remains closed to the public, a place where stories continue, and the echo of the unexplained persists.
Tonight we present
The Cayman Man. On a hot June morning in 1928, the fishermen of a quiet village on the banks of the Magdalena River began their day as usual. However, what Manuel Ramirez, one of the most experienced in the region, found changed their routine forever. On the riverbank, amidst the dense vegetation and mud, lay an impossible track, a huge mark that combined the shape of a reptilian claw with the curve of what appeared to be human fingers. Ramirez, terrified, ran to the village to give the alarm, triggering a series of events that would ultimately confirm the darkest fears of the villagers. The Cayman Man had returned. The Magdalena River, one of the most important waterways in Colombia, has witnessed countless stories over the centuries. Since pre-Columbian times, this river has been home to myths and legends that are part of the traditions of indigenous peoples, who considered its waters a portal between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Over time, these beliefs merged with stories brought by Spanish colonizers, giving rise to tales like that of the Cayman Man. The legend of the Cayman Man tells the story of a man who, consumed by his curiosity and forbidden desires, used a spell to transform into a cayman in order to spy on women bathing in the river. But, as in any moral warning, his ambition came at a cost. The spell did not work as he had hoped, and the man was trapped in the form of a cayman, retaining only his human head. Since then, the Cayman Man became a feared presence, haunting the waters of the Magdalena in search of new victims. By 1928, the historical context in Colombia was complex. It was a time of economic and social transition, with villages still deeply rooted in rural traditions. The river remained vital for commerce, communication, and the survival of riverside communities. But it was also a frontier between the known and the unknown, where legends served to explain what could not be understood. Reports of a large anthropomorphic cayman began shortly after that initial discovery. In the following weeks, fishermen and travelers claimed to have seen a strange creature gliding through the waters at dawn. A figure that, at first glance, appeared to be an ordinary cayman, but when approached, showed a head that resembled that of a man. Witnesses described glowing eyes, a macabre grimace, and sometimes a guttural sound that seemed like a distorted laugh. Fear spread like wildfire. The villagers stopped using the river for their daily activities and began organizing nightly vigils in the hope of catching or driving away the creature. Although many dismissed the sightings as superstitions or products of imagination, others began to link these events with recent disappearances. The most notable was that of Rosaura Gomez, a young woman known for her singing at dawn while washing clothes by the river. Rosaura disappeared without a trace one morning, and her laundry basket was found floating near the shore, with the fabrics torn as if something enormous had passed by. This event, combined with the sightings, confirmed for many that the Cayman Man was real and had returned to claim new victims. As rumors intensified, a man named Esteban Morales, a journalist from Bogota known for his investigative work on paranormal stories, arrived in the village. Intrigued by the accounts and seeing an opportunity to uncover the truth behind the legend, Morales began interviewing the villagers and gathering evidence. What he found was disturbing. One of the most striking stories was that of Juan Perdomo, an elderly fisherman who claimed to have seen the Cayman man up close. According to Perdomo, while rowing in search of fish, he noticed the waters stirring in a strange way. It was as if something enormous was moving beneath the canoe, he said. Then, the figure emerged, a large caiman that stared at him intently. But what made him row with all his might to the shore was not the animal's sharp teeth, but its humanoid face, which seemed to smile maliciously at him. Other witnesses reported similar incidents. Shadows moving beneath the water, tracks in the sand that disappeared abruptly, and a strange, sulfurous smell that permeated the air near the sightings. Morales' investigation also uncovered a disturbing connection. Many of the disappearances and encounters occurred around the time of the full moon, which fueled local superstitions even more. The climax of this tension came when Morales discovered an old document in the village parish. It was a record written by a priest in the 19th century, speaking of a beastly man, condemned for his sins of pride and lust. According to the text, this being was doomed to wander the river until someone could offer him true forgiveness. This discovery led Morales to begin questioning whether the legend was more than just a moral tale. One night, while Morales was conducting a vigil with some fishermen in an attempt to document the phenomenon, something unexpected happened. The river's waters began to move violently, as if an invisible force was stirring them from the bottom. Suddenly, a figure emerged just a few meters from their canoe. Under the moonlight, everyone could make out the details. The scaly, robust body of a caiman, but with a head that clearly belonged to a human. The fisherman, terrified, rowed desperately toward the shore, while Morales tried to stay calm and record what he saw. The creature followed them for several meters before submerging again into the water, leaving behind an unsettling silence. When they reached the shore, Morales reviewed his notes and discovered something that had gone unnoticed. In his desperation, one of the fishermen swore he had heard the creature whisper a human name before disappearing. The journalist knew then that the mystery was much deeper than he had imagined. While the village tried to process what had happened, Morales decided to delve further into the secrets of the river, certain that the truth he sought would not only change his life, but also the fate of all those living in the shadow of the Cayman man's legend. After the terrifying encounter in the river, Esteban Morales spent the night feverishly reviewing his notes. The image of the Cayman man chasing them remained fresh in his mind. But what disturbed him the most was not the creature's appearance, but the name that one of the fishermen swore he had heard, Rosara. With renewed determination, Morales began to search for patterns among the reported disappearances and sightings. He realized that all the victims shared something in common. They had all had some connection to the river. Whether they were fishermen, washers, or frequent travelers, their lives were intrinsically tied to the Magdalena. This, along with the discovery of the parish document, led Morales to formulate a hypothesis. Could the Cayman man be more than just a legend? Could he be an entity tied to the river and those who somehow profaned it? Determined to find answers, Morales contacted Dona Felisa, an elderly woman known for her knowledge of local traditions and legends. Felisa agreed to speak with him, but only on the condition that what she revealed would be treated with due respect. In her modest cabin, surrounded by prayers and the scent of burning herbs, the woman recounted the oldest version of the Cayman man legend. He wasn't just a curious man, Felisa explained in a grave voice. He was a man who defied the laws of God and nature. They say he made a pact with a sorcerer, seeking power and freedom for his darkest desires. But pacts always come with a price, and his was to remain trapped between two worlds, that of men and that of beasts. According to Felisa, the original spell not only condemned him to his monstrous form, but also bound him to the river as its cursed guardian. Any offense to the river, any disrespect, he punishes it. But he also seeks something else, she concluded, leaving Morales with more questions than answers. In the following days, Morales continued his investigations. With the help of Felisa and the local fishermen, he gathered more testimonies and patterns. He discovered that many of those who had disappeared or met their end in the river had been secretly accused of greed or immoral behavior. This seemed to reinforce the theory that the Cayman Man acted as a judge and executioner of the Magdalena. But as he delved deeper, Morales found something that chilled him to the bone. In the village records, there was a case from 1857 that described an almost identical sighting to the one he and the fisherman had witnessed. A group of merchants had been attacked by a similar creature, and in their statements, they also mentioned the murmur of human names before disappearing into the depths of the river. This discovery led him to formulate a disturbing theory. Could the Cayman Man be not just a single being, but a curse that could pass from one person to another? If that were the case, what conditions would be necessary for someone to become its next victim or bearer? One night, Morales and a group of volunteers decided to conduct another vigil near the place where most of the sightings had occurred. Armed with flashlights, nets, and cameras, they hoped to document any unusual activity. However, what they found was even more disturbing. While examining the shore, one of the men found an object buried in the mud. An old copper bracelet with an intricate design, seemingly depicting a cayman surrounding a human figure. Felisa, who had insisted on accompanying them despite her age, immediately identified the object. "It's a protective amulet," she said, "but it's also a mark. Whoever possesses it is bound to the river and its guardian." The bracelet had belonged to Rosara, the missing young woman, which confirmed to Morales that she had a more important role in the story than he had imagined. Shortly after, a figure emerged from the water. It was not the Cayman Man, but a spectral shadow that spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the bottom of the river. "Leave the river in peace, or you will share my fate," it warned before disappearing into the waters. The group, terrified, returned to the village with more questions than answers. The next morning, Morales decided to visit the village priest to obtain more information about the document he had found. The priest, initially reluctant, eventually confessed that there were more records about the Cayman Man, but they were hidden because they contained too dark details. In these texts, Morales discovered that the Cayman Man not only punished those who offended the river, but also sought redemption. The spell that had condemned him could be broken, but only if someone confronted him with courage and offered him genuine forgiveness. This explained the murmured names. The creature wasn't calling them as victims, but as those who could free him. That night, Morales returned to the river, alone and armed with Rosara's amulet. When he arrived, he called to the Cayman Man, determined to face the unknown. The creature emerged slowly, its eyes glowing under the moonlight. Morales, trembling but resolute, spoke directly to it. "I am not your enemy. If you seek redemption, tell me, and I will do what I can to help you." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, in a deep and melancholy tone, the Cayman Man replied, "I have waited centuries for someone to listen. My sin was great, but my punishment greater. Free me." Morales placed the amulet in the water and recited a prayer he had learned from Felisa. The river began to glow with a supernatural light, and the figure of the Cayman Man slowly vanished, leaving behind only a whisper, "Thank you." With the disappearance of the Cayman Man, the villagers began to reclaim their relationship with the river. Although many continued to see the Magdalena as a magical and fearsome place, they also learned to respect it as never before. Morales returned to Bogotá, but he never forgot that experience. In his final report, he wrote, "There are mysteries that cannot be easily explained, but that teach us to value the stories around us." The Cayman Man was not just a legend, but a reflection of our relationship with nature and with ourselves. Thus, the legend of the Cayman Man found a new chapter, one that would endure in the memories of the village and in the whispers of the river, which, under the moonlight, still seems to guard unspeakable secrets.
The Noctillion. Tonight we present
The Crying Woman, La Llorona. On a gray afternoon in November 1848, A group of gold seekers settled along the San Joaquin River in California reported a chilling event. While working in the mud searching for riches, several witnesses claimed to have heard the heart-wrenching cry of a woman, followed by the sight of a spectral figure in a white dress. Hours later, a child playing near the camp disappeared without a trace. This was not the only incident. Similar stories began to emerge along the border between Mexico and the United States. The disappearances, always near rivers, raised deep fears among the locals, who associated the events with a legend that had already rooted itself in the region. La Llorona, the woman who wanders the waters searching for her lost children. The gold rush had transformed California into a place of cultural encounters. Thousands of people, including Mexicans, Americans, and indigenous migrants, arrived at the mining camps in the hope of finding fortune. The mountains and valleys were filled with men and women working day and night, removing earth and stone in search of even the slightest sign of wealth. However, it was also a time of tension and tragedy, where the exploitation of resources and people marked the landscape as much as the rivers of gold themselves. The miners' greed for the precious metal led to conflicts and imbalances, while the natives watched as their lands and ways of life were crushed by the unstoppable expansion of the camps. In the Mexican communities near the border, stories of La Llorona had deep roots. They spoke of a woman named Maria, who, in a fit of despair, had drowned her children in a river after being abandoned by her lover. Filled with regret, Maria took her own life, but her spirit was condemned to wander the bodies of water, crying and searching for the children she lost. The stories of La Llorona were told in town squares, in homes by the fire, and among passing travelers. These tales had been passed down through generations, changing according to the place, but the message was the same. The lament of a woman by the river was an omen of tragedy. The legend had crossed the border, taking root in the hearts of those who, though they had never heard it before, felt an inexplicable fear at the whisper of the water. In the 1849 records, the San Joaquin Camp Diary documented a disturbing pattern. At least 5 children disappeared in less than a month. The mothers of the camp, desperate, searched through the brush and the muddy waters, but found no trace of their children. Many parents began to fear the inexplicable, wondering if perhaps something much beyond a simple human disappearance was happening. A witness to these disappearances was Miguel Garcia, a Mexican blacksmith who claimed to have seen a tall, pale woman with long hair walking by the river the night before his nephew vanished. Miguel described how the figure seemed unreal, as if the wind itself had turned into a tangible presence. The air grew unnaturally cold as she cried with a heart-wrenching voice, "Oh, my children!" The memory of that eerie figure remained imprinted in his mind, and the feeling of despair and loss that emanated from her seemed to crush everything else. The disappearances also caught the attention of local authorities, who speculated about criminal gangs or wild animals. However, the Mexican community insisted that it was La Llorona, and many families began leaving offerings of candles and amulets by the river, hoping to protect their loved ones from what they saw as a supernatural threat. As the disappearances continued, more unsettling testimonies emerged. A young American, Jacob Miller, wrote in his personal diary how he followed a group of children playing near the river. As night fell, he saw how a mist formed over the water, darkening everything around him, and from it emerged a female figure. The children, according to the testimony, began to walk toward the river as if hypnotized, as though an invisible force was guiding them. Miller, terrified, fled to the camp and never saw the children again. The disappearances grew stranger, and the figures seen by the river blurred with the mist, as if they had never existed in the first place. The testimonies grew more and more inconsistent, as if reality itself was distorting under the weight of the inexplicable. A local investigation uncovered strange patterns. In every disappearance, the children appeared to have left behind small belongings by the riverbank: wooden toys, shoes, and in one case, a broken rosary. There were no signs of struggle, and calculations of the water level indicated that no child could have been swept away by the current. Something didn't add up, and the darkest fears began to take shape. For the locals, there was no doubt. La Llorona had crossed the border with the gold seekers and continued claiming victims. The more superstitious ones said that the gold rush had awakened the spirit, and now she was punishing those who disturbed the land and the water, no longer just as a lost mother, but as a vengeful entity. Tension in the camp reached its peak when a group of explorers made a macabre discovery. In a clearing in the forest, less than 2 kilometers from the river, they found a cave with strange inscriptions on the walls, mixed with human remains. One of the mothers from the camp identified a small shoe that belonged to her missing daughter. That night, the locals gathered to discuss the finding. While some suggested leaving the area, others insisted on investigating further. It was then that a man named Jose Ramirez, known for his knowledge of folk stories and traditions, quietly said, "This is no ordinary cave. It is an altar, and it is not just La Llorona. There is something else." The wind blew fiercely at that moment, extinguishing the lit candles. The river's echo carried with it a mournful cry that everyone recognized immediately. The next morning, a group of armed men, led by Jose Ramirez, decided to explore the cave despite the collective fear. Armed with torches and tools, they ventured into the darkness, where the inscriptions on the walls seemed to vibrate under the light of the flames. The carved figures showed unsettling scenes. Women crying by rivers, hooded figures performing rituals, and shadows that seemed to devour children. The atmosphere was dense, and the darkness felt like it was wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. The men felt watched, as though something was lurking in the shadows. In the center of the cave, they found a rudimentary stone altar. On it lay a white cloth covered in dark stains. Among the altar objects were bones, melted candles, and a medallion engraved with a symbol no one recognized. As they moved the cloth, they uncovered a rudimentary map carved into the rock, which seemed to indicate other nearby locations along the river where there might be more altars. Suddenly, a chilling scream echoed from the cave entrance. One of the explorers who had stayed behind ran to them, saying he had seen a woman dressed in white floating above the river. Upon returning to the entrance, they found only silence, but the air was thick with an unnatural coldness. The explorers returned to the camp with the objects they had found. As they examined them, Jose Ramirez recalled a story his grandmother had told him in his childhood. She spoke of the daughters of the water, spirits who protected the rivers and punished those who polluted or disturbed them. Although many confused them with La Llorona, their purpose was older and darker. They did not seek their children. They sought sacrifices to maintain the balance between the world of the living and the world of the dead. According to his grandmother's tale, these spirits had been invoked by the first civilizations that had inhabited these lands long before the arrival of the conquerors, and their anger was tied to the desecration of the bodies of water. The gold rush had disturbed that balance by altering the rivers, contaminating the waters, and stealing the very essence of the land. That night, while the camp tried to sleep, the river began to overflow for no apparent reason. The waters flooded part of the land, taking tents and tools with them. The locals fled as they heard the echo of a woman's cry among the currents. The water rose unnaturally, covering fields that should not have been reached by the floods, and carried with it not just objects, but a general sense of despair. Amid the chaos, a girl who had disappeared weeks earlier was found near the forest, barefoot and covered in mud. The girl, unable to speak, only pointed toward the river and murmured a word, "She." The adults tried to calm her, but when they looked toward where the girl pointed, they saw a white figure standing in the middle of the turbulent waters, motionless, watching them. The figure seemed to be waiting for something, as if it had given them a chance for redemption or condemnation, depending on their response. But no one dared to approach. The girl, upon seeing the figure, began to cry uncontrollably as her fingers pointed to a deeper part of the river, toward the dark forest. Desperate, the camp's inhabitants decided to perform a ritual based on local traditions. Jose Ramirez led the ceremony, asking for forgiveness from the river spirits and offering the riches they had obtained as offerings. By dawn, the waters receded and the crying stopped. However, the camp was abandoned shortly after, as no one wanted to risk provoking the supernatural forces again. The survivors scattered to other settlements, and the stories of the gold rush and the disappearances became part of the region's folklore. Years later, the area was absorbed by the growing civilization, and the events were relegated to the tales of the elders. However, the records from the San Joaquin Camp Diary and the testimonies of the few survivors remain as proof that, in the depths of the mystery, there are forces that defy human understanding. And on the quietest nights, some claim that the lament of La Llorona can still be heard among the waters of the river. The places marked on the map, though forgotten by most, continue to be visited by those seeking something more than gold in the dark waters of San Joaquin.
The Noctillion. Tonight we present
The evil light of Argentina. In the region of Corrientes in northeastern Argentina, the countryside seems to harbor more secrets than one could ever imagine. There, amid the vast plains, the land seems to whisper stories from ancient times and inexplicable events. One of these stories has endured in the collective imagination as a legend that intertwines with reality, the legend of the evil light. This enigma, known to the locals as the appearance of luminous spheres that float over the dark fields on moonless nights, marks locations where it is believed hidden treasures from ancient indigenous peoples rest or, in darker tales, the spirits of those who have fallen victim to cruel fates. Stories of these lights were mere murmurs among the people until, in 1943, an unprecedented event occurred, bringing the legend to an entirely new level. Corrientes, a province known for its natural beauty and its connection to the Parana River, has been the setting for numerous historical events and local legends. However, during the year 1943, something inexplicable occurred in the rural areas that attracted the attention of the press and put the inhabitants on edge. It began on a stormy night when a group of farmers working in a field located about 40 kilometers from the city of Corrientes reported a series of strange lights hovering over their land. At first, the phenomenon was considered just a simple reflection of some atmospheric event. But when reports began to come in from other parts of the region, it became clear that something out of the ordinary was happening. The first disappearance occurred in the early hours of a particularly cold night when the head of one of the working groups, a man named Andres Alvarez, vanished without a trace. He had been alone in his field, watching over a maize harvest, when a bright flash appeared on the horizon. Witnesses claimed to have seen him walk toward the lights, as if something were calling him. A few hours later, the news of his disappearance began to circulate, and rumors about the mysterious lights intensified. During the same period, more baffling events were reported. Some people claimed to have seen the lights approaching their homes during the night. Others, however, reported hearing unintelligible whispers, as if spectral voices were floating in the air. The connection between these strange occurrences and the legend of the evil light began to take shape in the local conversations. It was said that those who approached the lights would disappear without a trace, as if they were swallowed by them, doomed to an unknown fate or, worse still, to an eternal trance-like state. Chaos ensued when several villagers decided to investigate further. Equipped with flashlights and other tools, they ventured into the fields to search for some logical explanation. No one returned that night. When family and friends ventured into the fields the next day, they found their belongings scattered, but there were no signs of life. Fear gripped the community, and the stories about floating lights began to merge with the old tales of hidden treasures and vengeful spirits. Some even hinted that the phenomenon was a curse related to an ancient conflict between indigenous peoples and colonizers, which they said had left behind an unpaid debt that now, in the form of lights, was returning to collect. As the testimonies accumulated, an invisible force seemed to surround the region. No one was safe from the wandering lights, and soon, the fear spread beyond the limits of the nearby villages. Even the local police, who had initially tried to downplay the matter, were forced to take action when they began to receive reports of mass disappearances and people claiming to have witnessed these strange phenomena. The connection with the evil light legend grew stronger, and soon, local newspapers began covering the story more extensively. The press reported that the lights not only appeared on moonless nights, but were also seen floating near ancient Guarani ruins, sites known for local legends about fallen warriors and forgotten secrets. This fueled the belief that the spirits of those warriors had not found peace, and that the lights were a manifestation of their restless souls. In an attempt to unravel the mystery, the local government sent a small scientific expedition to the region. A group of physicists, along with some experts in atmospheric phenomena, ventured into the fields to investigate the reports of lights. Although no definitive answers were found, the scientists reported a phenomenon of light reflection and refraction in the lower layers of the atmosphere. However, their explanations were not enough to calm the locals. The more devout insisted that there was something more behind the phenomena, something supernatural. Amidst all this, the figure of an elderly man began to gain importance in the stories circulating through the nearby towns. He was a man named Juan Ledesma, known for his knowledge of local traditions and beliefs. Ledesma had claimed for years that the evil light was not merely a natural phenomenon, but a warning. According to him, the lights marked the location of an ancient treasure, but they were also a sign that something dark was unfolding in the region. His story became the center of theories about the origin of the lights and the disappearances of people. Tension grew even more when, in the same week, the relatives of the missing people began to notice that, somehow, the lights seemed to be getting closer to the villages, as if they were hunting the people. Stories of voices and whispers continued, and the atmosphere in Corrientes grew thick with fear. Fear had taken hold of Corrientes. After weeks of disappearances and inexplicable phenomena, the region seemed to have fallen into a state of collective despair. People began abandoning their homes, while others sought refuge inside their houses, terrified that the lights might drag them to the same fate as the missing. The evil light legend had transcended the supernatural, becoming a symbol of terror, and the atmosphere had become suffocating, filled with rumors and speculations. Local authorities decided to send a new expedition to the region, this time with the goal of uncovering the truth behind the mysterious events. The mission was led by Inspector Jose Marquez, a pragmatic man known for his skepticism toward popular beliefs. He didn't believe in legends or the supernatural, and his task was to resolve what he saw as a social and psychological issue. However, as his investigation progressed, he began to find evidence that defied logic, pushing him into much more ambiguous territory. The expedition was composed of a team of researchers, including scientists and experts in atmospheric phenomena. At first, the investigations focused on analyzing the lights using advanced technologies, such as high-sensitivity cameras and radiation measurement equipment. However, they soon realized that their efforts were in vain, as the lights couldn't be captured or studied in conventional ways. It was as if, somehow, they vanished the moment they were observed directly. What happened next, however, completely changed the nature of the investigation. One night, while the team was conducting an exploration near the Guarani ruins, one of the team members, a young geologist named Raul Fernandez, vanished without a trace. According to the testimonies of others, Fernandez had fallen behind, separated from the group as he examined a strange rock formation when a luminous sphere appeared before him. In a matter of seconds, the man disappeared without leaving a trace. Panic spread throughout the team. Search parties were organized, but once again, no signs of him were found. However, something even more bewildering occurred that same night. The team noticed that the lights began to move toward them, as if responding to their presence, almost intelligently. It was as if the spheres were moving in a pattern, guiding them toward a specific location. Inspector Marquez, who had remained skeptical up until this point, felt a strange mixture of fascination and fear. He decided to follow the trail of lights, believing that if they could reach their origin, they might finally understand the nature of the phenomena. It was then that they arrived at an ancient indigenous cemetery, a site that had been abandoned for generations. The graves were covered in overgrowth, and the stones were engraved with symbols that none of the researchers could identify with certainty. In the center of the site, among the overgrown graves, they discovered something that left them stunned. A massive circular stone, its outline illuminated by the same luminous spheres. As they drew closer, the team could clearly see that the stone was engraved with strange symbols, similar to those used by the Guarani in their art and religion. But the most perplexing part was that in the center of the stone, there was a cavity, as though it were an opening in the ground. What happened next, when the researchers decided to enter the cavity, would forever change the history of the region. Inside the hole, they found a series of ancient objects, what appeared to be a Guarani ceremonial altar, adorned with precious stones and golden artifacts. But at the same time, what the investigators found was far more disturbing. In one corner of the altar, they discovered a series of human remains. These were scattered bones, belonging to people who, apparently, had been sacrificed in some way, as part of an ancient ritual. These remains, according to later studies, matched those of the individuals who had gone missing in the preceding weeks. The connection between the lights and the sacrifices was immediate. Archaeological experts began speculating that the evil light was not a natural phenomenon nor a supernatural manifestation, but rather a manifestation tied to the remains of a forgotten ritual. According to the beliefs of the indigenous peoples, the souls of those sacrificed could not rest until their sacrifice was acknowledged, and the luminous spheres might have been a manifestation of those souls, seeking a way to communicate with the living. The discovery of the human remains and the Guarani altar not only revealed a hidden part of the region's history, but it also led to a new interpretation of the events that had terrorized Corrientes for weeks. The lights were not only a sign of a hidden treasure, but they were also, in some way, a warning. Those who interfered with the forgotten past of the Guarani would be pursued by the restless souls of the sacrificed. However, the mystery did not end there. As the team began to gather the remains and study the altar more closely, they started experiencing strange occurrences. Some members of the team began to fall ill inexplicably, while others claimed to have heard whispers through the underbrush. The lights reappeared, this time more intense and focused on them. A sense of despair took over everyone. Ultimately, Inspector Marquez, who had witnessed all these events, made a drastic decision. He decided to seal the cavity and forbid any further exploration. The region of Corrientes, while never forgetting the events of 1943, returned to normal on the surface. However, the disappearances ceased, and the atmosphere of terror that had gripped the area dissipated. Today, the evil light legend remains an enigma in the region. Meanwhile, archaeologists have confirmed that the Guarani civilization practiced complex rituals, many of which involved human sacrifices, something that had been forgotten over time. However, some people still claim to have seen the luminous spheres dancing in the dark nights of the countryside. Are they truly the souls of those sacrificed, seeking justice, or is it simply a natural phenomenon still waiting to be understood? This mystery, although seemingly resolved in its most concrete aspects, continues to echo unsettlingly in the lands of Corrientes, where some say the lights never fully disappear.
The questions don't end here, nor does our pursuit. If this story unveiled something you never expected to discover, then you're in the right place. Remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this tale with others who, like you, are drawn to the unknown. Here, mystery always finds its voice, until we meet again, where the inexplicable will once again serve as our starting point.